Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is we spent a lot of time talking about the general core components that create the underlining graphical user interface using JavaFX. So those things were those components were like the stage, those components were like the scene that goes into the stage. And we talked about how each scene has its own scene graph and that the scene graph has nodes, and those nodes can be parent nodes that are like our layout elements, and they can have these internal nodes that are like the elements that we can go ahead and define the various properties of our graphic user interface, like buttons or labels or text fields or other things, images, things that we display to the user. And up to this point, we really have just looked at how we can set up everything in JavaFX. So we went a little bit into detail about how we can start separating the code base out. And JavaFX doesn't have to be strictly in Java, but we can also use XML to define the structure of our graphic user interface, the elements inside of there. We can also use CSS to define the styling of those elements. But now I think we can finally get to a part where we can start looking at, we can start examining the actual individual element nodes that we can put into the scene graph. And so since graphic user interfaces support controls, they support text, they support images, there's a number of critical elements we should just quickly kind of preview. So the first of those that I want to preview in terms of these element nodes is the image view, being able to insert images into our graphic user interfaces. So this is going to be just a very quick presentation. I'll give an introduction into what image view is. I'll go ahead and create we'll look about how we can create an image view element or instance. We'll look at how we can add an image view element to the scene graph, and then we'll take a look at image view and labels and buttons. So the JavaFX Imageview class can display an image inside a JavaFX GUI. The image view instance must be added to the scene graph in order to be visible. And so the JavaFX image view is represented by the class. So again, everything's in the JavaFX package. Inside of the scene package, there is an image package, and inside the image package is an image view concrete class that we can actually invoke to go ahead and view images. So if we want to create an image view, we can do that using the class image view. We create an instance of image view. So the image view instance elements use the image view class constructor. The constructor of the image view class needs an instance of an image as a parameter. So the image object represents the image to be displayed by the image view element. So here's an example of how we might do that. So suppose we open up this new file input stream, and we're going to go ahead and use as a string the file name, which is of an image inside of our file system. And so then I'm going to save this file input stream to a variable. And then I'm going to then call new image. And again, this image constructor is part of the JavaFX. And so this models the image as an object inside of Java. And so here I'll create an image instance. And then if I want to actually view this image inside of our GUI, I will pass a reference to the image object to the image view constructor. And then I will go ahead and save that image view instance into a local variable as well. So essentially, we take a file stream and we wrap a image object around there, and then we wrap an image view object around our image object. So suppose now that we have this image view object, we want to go ahead and add it to the scene graph so we can actually start to display it. So to make the image view visible, anything that's visible inside of our scene has to be attached to our scene graph. And that means adding it to the scene object. So since image view is not a subclass of JavaFX.scene.parent, it can't be added directly to the scene graph. It has to be nested inside another component, such as a layout component. And so here's an example that attaches the JavaFX image view to the scene graph by nesting it inside of an HBox, that's short for horizontal box layout component. So here we have a sample code where, okay, I'm going to import my application. I'm going to import my scene, I'm going to import my stage. Let me put this in. There we go. I'm going to import my layout. So that's my HBox. Let me put this in an order that makes sense. Then I'm going to import a button. I'm going to import an image, and then the image view that we're going to wrap around the image, and then a file input stream that we're going to be able to open that image in. So here, let me do this. Okay, perfect. So when I create this class image view experiments that extends our application, I'm going to have that start method that takes in a parameter of the stage. Here, I'm going to set the title. I'm going to create to my window. Then I'm going to go ahead and make an input stream that's going to go to where my PNG image is at. I'm going to pass that input stream around, attach my image object to that file input stream, and that's going to model my image internally here. Then if we want to view that image, I'm going to pass a reference or attach that image to this image view instance I'm going to construct. So now I have an image view element. And so this is what can be added into our scene graph. So it can actually now be displayed. Now I can't add that directly to the scene. So, but what I can do is I can pass a reference in my image view to a layout element, such as a horizontal box. So I'll create a new horizontal box, pass the image view to that. I'll get a reference to that, save that into variable. Then I can add that layout element into my scene. So I'll create a new scene with that horizontal box, and I'll give it a width and a height. And then I will then tell my stage to set the scene with that scene. And then I will say, show the stage, and then everything that's inside that scene graph will then display. And let's see here. What was the image view? So here. And so here, if we want to see an example of this, this should be very similar to what we have here. I have my file input stream. I'm going to open a JPEG in my file input stream. I'm going to pass that input stream to this image. I'm going to pass that image into the image view. I'm going to create a new vertical box and pass it a reference of that image view. I'm going to add that vertical box to the scene, and then I'm going to set the scene to my stage. I'm going to tell it to show. So let's actually take a look at this demo now that we've actually walked through some code. So let me go over here, get rid of that. Let me go here. Let's import that, and let's go ahead and run this. And here we can see what we'll get back as a result. Just wait a moment. Okay, and here we go. And there we can see we now have a window that has, or a stage that has a scene, and the scene contains this image that we have now rendered inside of it. Excellent. Okay, let's go back to our slides. Okay, perfect. And so, yeah, and a result would be effectively having an image that renders inside the scene, which is displayed on our stage. And so image view with labels and buttons. It's possible to use an image view in both JavaFX label, which is where we can just kind of, which is like a non-interactive element, is where we can kind of display passive data in our GUI, and also buttons, which can be like an active element that you can interact with to cause some event to trigger inside of our graphic user interface. So this will cause the label and button to display the image view to the left of the text and the label or button. And of course, if you want to center the image, if you want right, if you want it to display more on the right, if you want to put padding around it or margins, that's what the styling is for. So you use CSS styling to affect how the image would then be displayed within inside of the stage or the scene. And that's it. That's just what I want to kind of cover in terms of the image view. So once we start getting to the components, you can see it goes pretty quickly just to see how they're used and then move on.